Hi, bestie. How are you doing today? I hope you're having a fantastic day. Welcome or welcome back to the Best Friend Book Club. I am so happy you made it because today we are going to get into everything that happens in Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. Now, this is your spoiler warning. If you have not read this book, turn back now because it's going to be a chapter by chapter summary of every little thing that happens. But if you have not read the rest of the series after this, that's fine because I'm not going to get into anything other than what happens in this book. If you're interested, stay tuned and we'll have so much fun. If you want early access to all of the podcast episodes, you want access to the documents that I make for the theories and for the summaries for each of the books, you can check me out on Patreon. It's going to be patreon.com/bestfriendbookclubpodcast and go support me over there. I would really appreciate it. If you're watching the video version, you can see my cat has made an appearance yet again. He's just going to be hanging out with us today, I guess. But without further ado, let's get into Heir of Fire by Sarah J. Maas. This is one of my favorite books in the series. The reread's going to solidify it for me, but I loved Queen of Shadows, but I really, really like Heir of Fire. So we're going to start with part 1, Heir of Ash. Now, I will also say we are in 3 different places in this entire book. 1, the Omega with Manon. 2, Rifthold with Chaol, Adian, Dorian, Sorsha. And then 3, Wendelin with Selena, Rowan, and that whole thing. So we do go back and forth. I will try to tell you I will tell you whose POV we're in, what all's going on. It's just, we're in for a long ride, okay? I took a lot of notes. I love this series so, so much. One of my favorite series ever written. So let's jump in. So we're starting part 1, Heir of Ash. The first chapter we get is from Selena's point of view. So Selena Sardathian is drunk on a rooftop in Wendelin. She arrived 2 weeks ago and has decided that she's not going to kill her 2 targets. And those targets are the king and the prince of... I actually forgot what they're the king and the prince of, but not Wendelin, but whatever's going on over there. Instead, she's going to take that time to look for the word keys. So she wants to find Maeve, who's queen of the Fae, and she wants to talk to her because she was alive when those word keys were made. She's up on that rooftop, missing Nehemia, thinking about her a lot, and she decides not to kill. One of the targets is Galen Ashriver. He's the prince of Wendelin. I guess it's of all of Wendelin. Who has the same eyes that she does. And when she saw how much his people loved him, like, she decided she was not going to do this. And then she thinks to herself that him and Nehemia would have led the world to freedom together. So obviously he's somehow related to her. They have the same eyes. He's an Ash River. I feel like that should be enough to not kill him, but for those other reasons too. She comes off of the rooftop and this vagrant woman mistakes her for someone competing with her for space. And then she hears a deep male voice chuckling behind her. Real quick note, as she's on that rooftop, there is a white-tailed hawk kind of watching her. So it then goes on to Selena turning around and seeing this male fae with silver hair who's very tall and broad-shouldered, and he has a tattoo going down the left side of his face. He says to her, "Let's go." That is all he says. Let's go. He turns around and leaves. She follows, and he leads her to these 2 horses, and they start making their way out of the city, and she knows that they're going to see Maeve. She asks what she can call him, and he says Rowan. So we have officially met Rowan. We're then going to shift over to what's going on in Rifthold from Chaol's point of view. So he's daydreaming about Selena killing Archer, but then Archer turns into Dorian, and Selena's enjoying the kill, and then she's enjoying bouncing on Chaol. Like, he is just all over the place. I was like, oh, she's bouncing on it now. Okay. And then Dorian's like, hey, bro, what's going on over there? So Dorian snaps him out of it. He knows that he was thinking about Selena, and he lies and says that he was thinking of how he's going to be going back to Aniel soon with his dad. In walks Adian Ashriver. So this is General of the North, also cousin to Aelin Galathinius, also Wolf of the North. He's wearing a black ring on his finger. That can't be good. He talks to the king, and then he sits with Dorian and Kale is realizing how similar Aedian's eyes are to Aelin, and he keeps trying to distract Dorian from looking into Aedian's eyes and making that connection. Aedian is seen as a traitor because he's turned on the people of Terrasen by serving the king. And Aedian carries the sword of Orinth, which is an heirloom of Terrasen's royal family. Aedian is trying to get Dorian upset just because he's a little shit stirrer, and this is about to trigger Dorian's magic. So Kale makes up an excuse for them to leave. Dorian then asks Kale why he really sent Celaena to Wendelin, and Kale's response is to do what needs to be done. We then move on to Manon's point of view. Now, this is the first time that we're meeting her, and Manon is in a valley north of Fenharrow, and she's pretending to be a Kraken witch to hopefully lure other Kraken witches to her so that she can kill them. Her name is Manon Blackbeak. She's heir to the Blackbeak witch clan. She has silver white hair, iron teeth, and iron nails that go over her real teeth and real nails. I feel like that needs to be said because people are like, does she just not have teeth? I feel like she has regular teeth. The iron ones just go over the top. She wears a blood red cloak that she took off of her first Kraken witch that she ever killed. I think it's Kraken. Kraken. And she's staying in this little cottage, and 3 farmers come from the village with the intent to kill her. But she has other plans, and she ends up ripping out each of their throats. We then move to Wendelin, where Celaena and Rowan are traveling to go see Maeve. They stop for the night. They can't risk a fire because of whatever is lurking in the forest. We see the little folk that we saw in Throne of Glass. They appear as a bunch of small glowing eyes, and she tells them they still live, meaning the little folk in the west still live. Rowan isn't really talking to her all that much, which she appreciates because at this point in time, she's too tired to speak. We move back to Rifthold, where Dorian is in the king's personal chambers, and he tells Dorian that he will be keeping Aedian and Ash River entertained today. So Dorian's job, hang out with Aedian. They discuss that the king is keeping Aedian around because his rage is a useful tool. Dorian and Aedian then go for a walk through the gardens, and Aedian pushes Dorian into a rose bush where the guards weren't looking, and Dorian's hands start bleeding. Aedian goes, "You should probably get that looked at," and he walks off. So Dorian goes to find a healer, and he comes across Sorsha, who gets him all cleaned up. She assures him that sometimes healers forget, air quotes around forget, to document certain injuries, and she sends him on his way. At this point, we switch over to Sorsha's point of view, and she's thinking about how she's watched everything play out between Celaena, Kale, and Dorian. How Dorian was the one holding Celaena in her bed after the fight with Cain, but Kale was the one holding her in her bed after she was poisoned. She was the one to heal all of them and Fleetfoot after the end of what happened in Crown of Midnight. This is the first time Dorian has noticed her or asked her for her name, but she's been in love with him since she laid eyes on him 6 years ago. We're going to switch back to Wendelin. So this is Celaena and Rowan. They're traveling for a few more days, and they make it to this fortress that has wards around it, and she believes that this is the halfway point to Doranel. Rowan brings her to an office in the main building of the fortress. Sitting behind the desk is Maeve, Queen of the Fae, and her aunt. And she says, "Hello, Aelin Galathinius." The door is then closed behind Celaena, and she has a conversation with Maeve. Celaena insists Aelin Galathinius is dead, but Maeve is not buying that bullshit. Maeve reveals that Rowan is from her sister Mora's bloodline, making him Maeve's nephew and distantly related to Celaena. We will come back to that. Apparently, Maeve has eyes everywhere and knows pretty much everything about Celaena, including her time in Endovier. But she doesn't tell Rowan that part just yet. Celaena's instincts are telling her to run the entire time she's having this conversation. But she essentially makes a deal with Maeve to train in Mistward with Rowan until he decides that she's ready, and then he will be taking her to Doranel, where Maeve will truthfully answer her questions about the word keys. Maeve says her reasoning for all this is for Celaena to become queen, the queen that she was meant to be. That's why she needs this to happen. So Rowan takes her to where she'll be staying. On the way there, they start going back and forth, and she says Fae like him make her understand why the king is doing what he's doing, meaning killing magic wielders and the Fae in general. He ends up punching her in the face, and once she tastes blood, she's feeling like she's glad he hit her and that she deserved it, basically. He invites her to take the next hit, and she keeps trying to hit him, and he's moving out of the way, and he's like, you're just proving my point that you need to train. You have a lot left to learn. He makes her completely disarm, tells her that she has kitchen duty in the morning, and she lays awake thinking about how she more than deserved that punch for the things that she said. She thinks about Terrasen and how she damned them all by abandoning them, essentially. I just want to say she was 8 years old when she abandoned them. But maybe that's just me. Don't know that I said this before, but Manon is an Iron Teeth witch. So we're with Manon now, and she's standing guard while her grandma has a meeting with the Duke. She's joined by 12 sentries, and them together are known as the 13. Manon says that there are 2 carriages with them, and the people inside them, along with the Duke, smell off. Her grandma tells her to send 3 of her sentries, south, east, and west, tell all of the witches they see to gather in the Farian Gap because the king has been breeding wyvern and needs riders. So they're going to fight in his aerial legion. In exchange, after all the war is over, they get to keep the wyvern. We're now going back into Rifthold with Kael's point of view, and he finds that 2 of his guards have abandoned their post. They were invited into Rifthold by Aedion, who told them that Kael would be fine with it. He, of course, has to go hunt them down. Them meaning the guards and Aedion. So he gets to this party, and he sends 2 guards back to the castle while he looks for Aedion. And he sent all around this party on a wild goose chase, being like, have you seen Aedion? Have you seen Aedion? And they're all telling him something different. Like, oh, I just saw him go into the next room. Oh, I saw him playing the fiddle over there. They're just kind of telling him what they saw. Come to find out, he left an hour ago, and we find out that the Bane, which is the army that Aedion leads, the Bane are coming to Rifthold, and Kael needs to put an end to their partying before it starts. The beginning of this book, I feel like you jump around so much, but then towards the middle, it's more like bigger chunks with each character. With that being said, we are back in Wendelin with Celaena. So Celaena is given a new set of clothes and takes a proper bath before going to her first shift in the kitchen. Rowan meets her there, and she introduces herself as Alentia. So that is the name that Nehemia gave her in Crown of Midnight. Or Throne of Glass, but that's the name that Nehemia gave her. She introduces herself to Emrys, who's like the main chef, and Luca, who looks a few years younger than her and has basically the same job as Celaena. Rowan leaves her there, and she gets to work. Breakfast is served quickly. She finally sits down to eat something before starting her training. And then she speaks with Emrys and Luca briefly about how long they've been there and how Maeve usually snatches up the really powerful Fae and brings them to Doranel. We also learn that they are not allowed to learn the old language until they enter Doranel. We're going to switch over again to Manon. So they've made it to the Farian Gap, and she had to break up a fight between Astrid, which is her cousin and her second, and someone from the Yellowlegs clan. And she then had to punish Astrid with 3 unblocked blows. So that just seems to be the norm. When you mess up, you're getting your shit rocked. The leaders of the 3 witch clans are taken to where the wyvern are being bred and raised, And they're shown the fighting pits, told about bait beasts, which are the smaller wyvern that they use to have something for the bigger ones to turn their aggression on. They bring out one of their baddest wyvern, and his name is Titus. And of course, he's humongous. He's the most aggressive. And Manon says that she will have Titus and no other as her mount. We're switching back over to Wendelin, where Selena is with Rowan. So Rowan gets her from the kitchen and brings her to the forest and tells her to shift into her Fae form. She tells him no, and they kind of go back and forth a little bit. He attempts to attack her to get her to shift in order to defend herself. That doesn't work. She ends up hitting her head on a rock, and he straddles her and is telling her to shift. She offers him money in exchange for lying to Maeve and saying that her training is done. She's like, please, I just don't want to do this. Just, I got money, please. He ends up calling her a spoiled child, and then he calls her a coward, which we know how she feels about that word because that is what Nehemia called her in their last conversation. She basically dissociates and stops hearing him completely. He ends up taking her to these foothills where there's ancient tombs of lords and princes that have long since passed. And there's these things called wights, Wights, that are locked with the treasure in the tombs to basically feed on whoever tries to steal the treasure. So Rowan tells her if she can make it across the field without being caught by one of the wights, then he will take her to Doranel. So she starts walking through the field and she can feel the wight watching her. But then she sees what looks like a man standing there, a beautiful man. And then this darkness surrounds her. She is then stuck in the memory of realizing that her parents are dead, and then it moves to Nehemia's death. She ends up throwing up, wetting herself, and is able to run to Rowan. She shifts back and forth between her human and fae form multiple times and then wakes up in the forest. She tells him that she wants to be taken back to the fortress, and she's dropped off at the women's bathing chambers. One thing about a Sarah J. Maas character, they will piss themselves. They will throw up. Cool. We are moving back to Kale's point of view in Rifthold. So he's having a meeting with his dad, telling him that he needs more time to find his replacement as captain of the guard. He's also been attending Adian's parties, but he isn't there by the time Kale shows up. So Adian is missing, which is suspicious. His dad gives him a letter from his mom that he lies and says he doesn't want to read. His dad agrees to give him 2 months before he's expected in Aniel. We then have Sorcia's point of view, and she's summoned to Dorian's tower. He injured his hands again, and he has a split lip. I think it's from sparring. It's never really explicitly said, but Sorcia thinks it's from sparring as well. So she's very nervous around him, and he's asking her about where she's from, why she never reported what happened to him and his friends. And they agree that the world needs better people. They talk about her parents being killed in the immigrant purge, and then she leaves. She's worried that he will not call on her again, but he sent a servant to find out which town she was from exactly so he could add it to his personal map. I really love, lover boy Dorian. I can't get enough. When he turns into this, he's just, so sweet instead of, this super flirty. I don't know. I just like it. So we're back with Manon. She's in the dining hall with the 13. Tensions apparently have been really high between the 3 clans, and she's had to punish people from her own clan. Today is the day they finally get to fly after 10 years of not being able to. Iskra, she's the heir of the Yellowlegs clan, is talking mad smack on Manon, and she's trying to start a fight, but Manon doesn't engage. The 13 end up mounting wyverns and finally feeling the wind like they once did. They're very excited, but they're super emotional about it as well. And she has a meeting with her grandma afterwards, who tells her that she wants Manon and the 13 to be wing leader, and there will be war games to decide the ranks. And that's where we leave Manon. because we're going back to Wendelin to see Selena. So she wakes up and she's feeling the effects of shifting back and forth between her fae and human form. She's all bruised up, and then she goes to kitchen duty. Luca and Emrys seem to be worried about her. The other demi-fae keep staring at her, and it's starting to aggravate her more and more. We then meet Malachi, who's mated to Emrys, and he basically tells Selena, don't fuck with my mate. He's like, don't you dare fuck with my mate, and we won't have any problems. Rowan then takes Selena to the temple ruins and tells her to shift. She refuses, and when he steps away to, I'm assuming, go use the bathroom in the woods, she tries to shift, but she just can't. They end up going back to the fortress, where she goes down to the kitchen for dinner to find people gathered around the hearth, listening to Emrys tell them a story about these different creatures. So Emrys is the storyteller. That's his official title at this fortress. She looks outside to see a white-tailed hawk and realizes that Rowan's animal form is the white-tailed hawk. Remember the white-tailed hawk from earlier, chapter 1. Okay, when he's done, he asks Selena to share a story of her own, but she says no and then goes back to her room. Then we're back in Rifthold, ladies and gents. We are bouncing around so much. So Dorian is again visiting Sorsha in her workspace. She asks him about the creature that was killing people before Yulmus, and if that's the same creature that injured Fleetfoot. She then asks if the king would punish Dorian if he found out about all of that stuff that happened. Sorsha then says that the king would probably kill Selena and Kale if he found out, and this causes Dorian's magic to erupt. We then have Sorsha's point of view in this, and she's getting reprimanded by Amethy, who's the head healer at the castle. And Sorsha was just like, well, I slipped and knocked the table over, when in reality, Dorian's magic exploded, and then she asked Dorian to help her knock the table over to make it look like that's what happened. And after all that, she promised Dorian that she wouldn't tell anyone, and then she would look into something that could potentially stifle his magic enough to not make that happen again. Kale's point of view, as he's following Aedion through the streets of Rifthold. He slipped away from the party and put a hood over his head, and Aedion ends up meeting up with the man with the twin blades from Crown of Midnight, and that was the same guy that was working with Archer. Kale watches all of this, and Aedion follows the man inside and is so focused that he doesn't see someone behind him with a dagger before it's breaking his side. Now, I just want to say, Kale, for being captain of the guard, he's caught slipping quite a bit. He needs to focus. So he's then brought before Aedion and the old man from the warehouse in Crown of Midnight. Aedion reveals that his black ring is a replica and the king doesn't control him, which the king doesn't know that. He tells Kale that he has two options. Either he gets tortured for information and killed, or just tell us what you know and we'll make it a simple death for you. Nice and easy. And Aedion's about to swing his sword when Kale says, Aelin is alive. So we switch over to Aedion's point of view. And he's speaking with Kale one-on-one because that's the only person that Kale will tell this to. We find out that Aedion didn't actually kill those rebels that were traitors to Aderlin. That they would stage these battles, and under the cover of darkness, the bodies, air quotes around the bodies, would get up and go home, which I think is so crazy, but I really love that. Kale tells Aedion more about Aelin and asks if she's coming back, to which Kale says he doesn't know. Aedion is internally feeling very hopeful about knowing his cousin is alive, and he goes by many different titles: General, Wolf, Prince, Traitor, Murderer, but he says that cousin was his most beloved title. I love that so much. So the man with the twin swords and the old man are Ren and Murtog Alsbrook, who Aedion knew as a child and are allies to Terrasen. Aedion decides not to kill Kale just yet because it wouldn't go over well with his queen to kill her lover. So he doesn't really know where they stand, but he kind of could piece together that there was some feelings there. and he asks Kale to tell him more about the rings, to which Kale says he wants to make a bargain with Adian. We're then moving to Wendelin. A few days go by where Celaena's attempting to shift with Rowan and nothing is happening. She listens to more stories that Emrys tells, and then one day she asks Rowan to show her him shifting, which he does. Afterwards, she starts talking about this being a punishment for him to have to train her and starts talking shit about Maeve, which pisses off Rowan. He ends up biting her neck, and then she pushes him off of her and shifts. Immediately after that, he goes, "Does your lover know what you are?" "Why are you asking about her lover, Rowan?" And when she says he knows everything, Rowan's response is that he won't be biting her again because you don't bite the woman of other males. And he tries to get her to shift again. It's not happening. He then threatens to give her a lashing, to which she promises to skin him alive if he ever takes a whip to her. He then tells her that she's worthless and she probably would have been more useful to the world if she actually died 10 years ago. Now, Rowan is one of my favorite MMCs written by Sarah J. Maas. I just have a real hard time with, I forgot all this. I forgot how harsh he could be. But getting back to the story, she goes back to the fortress and packs a singular bag and starts the journey away from Wendelin. After all that, she's like, nope, not happening. Rowan intercepts her in the forest and he asks why she's giving up and says that he doesn't know what she wants from Maeve. She tells him that she wants to save the world from the king of Adarlan and tells him of the promise that she made her friend to save her kingdom. They go back and forth a little bit here, and she tells him that that friend is dead, and that's why she can't save her own kingdom. She continues on by herself. She finds this little spot to sleep for the night, and she starts a fire. She makes a plan to get to the coast and make her way back to Adarlan from there, I believe. She's almost asleep when she's awoken by a sudden silence. When she wakes up, she sees 3 figures and notices this horrible smell and then starts to run. She runs directly into Rowan, who pulls her into a hollow tree, and he tells her that these are skinwalkers. She needs to shift into her Fae form so they can escape. He tells her that they can't be killed with mortal weapons. She ends up shifting and they start running towards this river. They leap off of the edge and she turns around and lights the skinwalkers on fire. Afterwards, they discuss magical burnout and how the well of magic she feels has a bottom to it. Rowan tells her about being captured and shackled in iron to keep him from using his powers. Rowan then reveals that he is bound by a blood oath to Maeve to keep Celaena alive, but even without that, he wouldn't have left her to the skinwalkers. He asks why her shifting was different this time, and she says that she didn't want him to die to save her. We'll touch back on that later. She shifts back into her human form, and he tells her that she's not leaving, gives her his cloak and jacket before turning around and heading back to the fortress, and she follows him. We are going back to Manon, and it's time to pick wyverns. So each wyvern is brought out, and the witch that wants that specific wyvern is supposed to step forward to claim it, and then they basically draw sticks to figure out who gets that wyvern. Iskra, who's the Yellowlegs heir, and Manon are both holding out for Titus. They know he's back there. They're waiting for him to show up. He's the biggest, the baddest. Petra, who's the blue blood heir, seems to take Manon's side and tells her that she doesn't want to see Iskra get Titus. Iskra ends up pushing Manon into the pit when they bring Titus out, and she ends up trying to fight off Titus. She's then protected by the bait beast. She cuts the iron holding the bait beast to the wall, and then he attacks Titus. Manon goes over and cuts off Titus's tail, and the bait beast ends up killing Titus. She ends up claiming this bait beast as her mount and he was half the size of Titus. She names him Abraxos. Astron was punished for letting Iskra push Manon into the pit. And then Manon is told by the trainers that Abraxos has never flown a day in his life, and they don't know if he's even able to fly. They insist she train alone with him because the other wyvern will attack him because that's what they're used to. She's determined to train with him until the war games and win the games to prove everyone wrong. We are back in Rifthold with Chaol, and we find out that the bargain that he made with Aedion / the rebels was information for information. So Chaol and Aedion go down to the tombs to exchange information through the secret passage behind Celaena's room. Chaol tells Aedion Celaena gave him the Eye of Elena and that it belonged to her ancestor who summoned her there. We then switch over to Dorian's point of view, and he's eavesdropping on this conversation between Chaol and Aedion. He's able to piece together who Celaena truly is, and he's hurt by this because Celaena and Chaol both lied to him and didn't deem him trustworthy enough to tell him that information. Aedion catches Dorian in the hallway, and Dorian asks Chaol how long he knew. It's starting to get colder in the room. Dorian asks Chaol if he told Aedion about him, to which Aedion answers, no, but if you don't pull yourself together, everyone in the realm's going to know about you. Dorian then accuses Chaol of doing all of this to end up being Aedion's king by marrying Celaena, which Chaol denies, and Aedion says that his queen would never marry a man from Adarlan. He then basically agrees to keep their secrets, but he doesn't want any part in their planning. So Dorian then storms off. We switch over to Aedion's point of view. He leaves the castle to have a conversation with Ren and Murdaugh. They want to know what he found out about Aelin, but he refuses to tell them. They talk briefly about what other allies they could potentially have. Aedion is thinking about the blood oath and how it would seal his position as Aelin's lifelong protector if he took it. And this is essentially Aedion starting to build Aelin's court. So now that he knows she's alive, he's working to build that court for her for when she comes back. We're back in Wendelin with Celaena. Rowan brings her to the temple again, and she finds out that this is the temple of Mala, the sun goddess, in hopes that it will help her with her magic. They briefly discuss Maeve not sending any aid to Terrasen 10 years ago when the king of Adarlan was cutting them down. Then the next morning, she's noticing that the males are keeping their distance from her, and they're responding weirdly when she smiles at them. Rowan tells her that she's putting off this scent that basically says she does not want to be approached, which I love that. Rowan then brings Celaena to a river with a dead woman in it, and he says that since she wanted to make herself useful, she can help figure out what happened. So yet again, she's playing Sherlock Holmes. She sniffs the air and she thinks it's the same scent from the night that her parents died. She thinks it's the same being that she saw in the field with the tombs because the woman's body was a completely empty husk and she looked scared like she'd been screaming. Rowan tells her that this is the fourth body they've found. They're trying to make sense of all of this. All of them look exactly the same. They need to head back to the fortress, but Celaena wants to bury her, and the ground is too hard, so she starts a fire by hand, and Rowan wordlessly uses air to fuel that fire. We're back in Rifthold with Chaol and Aedion. So Chaol ends up meeting Aedion at the apartment that Celaena left to him in her will. They look around, and Aedion takes some time to basically get to know the woman that Aelin became through her belongings. She has some decorations on her table in the colors of Terrasen, and then a statue of a stag, and that's about it as far as her connection to Terrasen. Chaol and Aedion end up talking about the day that magic disappeared and how different people have described either 2 or 3 waves, depending on their location on the continent, of something, and then magic disappeared completely. So Aedion asks Chaol why he's helping his enemy, and Chaol basically says that he knows he was being lied to by the king. Then Aedion tries to say that they should get Dorian to fight with them against the king because more people would join them if they saw the king's own son fighting against him. But Chaol doesn't want Dorian involved at all. Speaking of Dorian, we have his point of view. He's with Sorsha. They've been spending an hour a day together trying to find something to suppress his magic. They're able to figure out that if they add more iron to his blood that should be able to suppress his magic enough for him to live a normal life. They try that out, it works, and he ends up getting so excited that he kisses her. She seems completely unfazed by this kiss, and he thinks maybe she just didn't want to be kissed. We are now back in the Omega with Manon and all the witches. So Manon's in the Omega with Astrid, watching the Yellow Legs witches fly with their mounts. She orders Astrid to keep watch on them while she goes to see Abraxos. Now, Abraxos won't let the trainers put a saddle on him. They keep using whips to try to get him in line. Manon dismisses all of the trainers and approaches Abraxos. He seems to understand what she's saying, so maybe Abraxos speaks the common tongue. She tells him he needs to put the saddle on, and they're going to put iron spikes in his tail because the spikes on his tail were cut off, and give him iron teeth so he can better protect himself and Manon. Over the next 5 days, they make those changes, and she tells Astrid, who's her second, and Sorel, her third, that she will be ready to fly with them within a week. She's lying to them, but they seem to believe her. Back in Wendelin, Rowan takes Selena to investigate yet another dead body. They're traveling 20 miles away from the fortress, and they need to ask the townspeople some questions. So he asks her to shift, and she ends up using anger as her tool to help her shift. They run through the forest together, and they're essentially playing with each other's magic as they run. This was super cute. They get to the town, and everybody claims they don't know what's going on. They're like, I don't know. And everything's closing up. All the shops are closing until they start spending money, and all of a sudden the shops are open. Selena has a dream or like a memory of her parents having a conversation in the next room, arguing over sending her off to train her magic. Because she had burned these books in the library, the librarians were furious, obviously, and Adian had snuck into her room and comforted her until they were caught and he was sent out. She told her parents she didn't want to be queen. They say they'll discuss it in the morning. Selena then wakes up, and Rowan asks her to start a fire. She ends up lighting the entire clearing on fire. She didn't shift back into her human form, so Rowan counts that as a win. We are back in Rifthold yet again, and we are in Sorcerer's point of view. So they decided to put iron in his contraceptive tonic to not bring any unnecessary eyes to him because he'll be taking this daily. Things seem a little awkward after the kiss, and she hurries up to leave, and she leans against the wall outside his tower to like catch her breath. He swings the door open to like chase her, realizing she's right there, and then she grabs him and kisses him. I love them together. They're so stinking cute. We then have Kale's point of view. He's meeting up with Adian, Ren, and Murtagh. They're waiting for Ren and Murtagh to arrive, and Kale tells Adian about the deal that he made with his dad to return to Aniel. Adian says he didn't know that kind of honor still existed in Adarlan. Kale, the man you are. Ren ends up staggering towards them, holding his bleeding stomach. He tells them he's being followed by 6 men, and Adian can hear him. Well, really quick, I don't know if I mentioned it before, Adian has heightened senses, so sight and hearing, and he can he has Fey hearing, essentially. He has all the heightened Fey senses. So he can hear the 6 guards, and he ends up sending Kale and Ren to go hide behind these barrels, and he ends up killing all 6 of them in a matter of moments, and shows Kale that they have the royal sigil on them, but it's in a black fabric with a black sigil. Kale doesn't recognize any of the men, and then Ren ends up taking them to this place to hide. Well, he tells them where to take him because he's losing consciousness. They end up in an opium den. The madam put them in a room and applies makeup to them, gives them a pipe to make it look like they're partying, and the guards come in looking for them but don't recognize them, so they move on. That same madam then stitches up Ren. Murtagh shows up and tells Kale about his theory about magic, which is that the waves described from the day that the magic disappeared seem to form a triangle. They believe that it was a spell sent from these different points like a beacon. We then find out that Murtaugh and Ren have basically just been squatters, and Kill offers up Selena's apartment for them to stay in, but doesn't tell them who the apartment belongs to. We are back in the Omega with Manon, and she's trying to get Abraxos to eat this mutton leg, but he won't eat it, and when she bites it, it tastes off the same way that the blood of the human man from the mountain tastes off. Abraxos is just sniffing all the flowers while she gets him a fresh goat, which he does eat. She then has a meeting with her grandmother, who tells her that she needs to be airborne by tomorrow evening, and if not, don't bother coming home. Manon is back with Abraxos trying to get him to fly, and he's pretending he can't hear her. She ends up getting in the saddle anyway, and he ends up freaking out, and they fall over the edge of the cliff. They're plunging towards these sharp rocks at the bottom, and at the very last second, Abraxos opens his wings and a draft pulls them up. They soar through the skies, and she realizes that he spent his entire life chained underground, and he's experiencing this for the first time. Abraxos releases a sound of joy that Manon echoes, and the 13 make plans to practice flying together every morning and tell no one. That just reminded me of the Grinch. Solve world hunger, tell no one. Then we have Selena's point of view. We are back in Wendelin. A week has passed and there have been no new bodies. Rowan is trying to get her to light a candle, and she can't do that without destroying everything around her. One night, Emrys is telling stories by the fire, and she asks to hear stories specifically about Queen Maeve. He talks a little bit about things that she already knew, and when she asks if Maeve was ever mated, to which Emrys says no, he continues to tell stories, and she sees a massive mountain cat outside, which then shifts into this Fey warrior. Rowan greets this Fey warrior, and they disappear to his room. Selena can't stop thinking about this for whatever reason, and she then makes an excuse to go to his room by bringing up some dinner for them. She sees Rowan tattooing this Fey man. His name's Gavriel, and he's laying on the table. She leaves, and he follows after her. She asks if he does this for money, and he says he would never stoop that low, kind of making a dig at the fact that she was an assassin for money. You know, all that. She says that he just left her and she has no one. He freaks out and basically tells her that she's nothing to him. He doesn't care. And then it says with each step she took back to her room, that flickering light inside of her went out. She's basically numb the next morning. She's described as a bit of rock in a stream, and everything is just moving past her. That is until Emrys shows her a knife that Malachi got him from Eelway, which reminds her of the knife that Nehemia used to carry, and she starts thinking about her friend. She ends up snapping and telling him that she doesn't care. She doesn't care about any of them, about their stories, about their kingdom. Luca and Malachi jump in front of Emrys to protect him, and she's shouting, and she just ends up walking out the door. We switch to Rowan's point of view, and he was tattooing the names of the fallen into Gavriel's skin. Emrys has a conversation with him when he goes down to the kitchens and asks what he's doing to that girl that makes her have such emptiness in her eyes. He then tells Rowan that he knew Aylin's mother and they were close friends, so of course he recognizes her daughter as soon as he sees her. He knows exactly who she is. Selena goes to this lake and begins weeping, and then hears the voice of her mother asking her why she's crying. I boohoo cried, even on the reread. And she says because she's lost and she doesn't know the way. Rowan shows up and asks if she wants to talk about it, to which she says no. He says good, because he's taking her somewhere. Rowan then brings her to a cave that has this frozen lake, and in the middle of the frozen lake is Luca chained up, and the chains go into the water and are frozen down in the water. Rowan tells her to shift so that she can go get Luca. So she shifts and she crosses the ice, and she's trying to calm herself the whole time she's crossing so she doesn't melt the ice. When she finally gets to him, she's able to control her power enough to melt this little hole in the ice that's big enough to pull the chain up. They go to leave, but then she sees a giant red eye staring up at her from underneath the frozen layer. She then tells Luca to run, and Rowan creates a path of thicker ice from them to the shore. The creature keeps trying to break through the ice. Rowan slides a sword that he found with a ruby in the hilt to Selena, and then she runs to the shore with Luca. They make it out of the cave and they continue running. When they make it back to Mistward, which is the fortress, she sends Luca away and then she punches Rowan in the face repeatedly. She tells him never to use someone against her like that, like never use someone else to make her do something. She tells him what happened to Nehemia and she can't take it again. She burned through his clothes and left welts on his skin from where she was holding his wrists. Rowan ends up letting her keep the sword. They talk to Emrys, who sees her fae form and tells her that he knew her mother. She apologizes. She gets on her knees and apologizes to Emrys, Malachi, and Luca for what she said earlier. Selena asks about this beast in the mountain, and Emrys tells them the story that he heard from someone who was trying to get into Maeve's realm without an invitation. So the creature's eye was carved out by that warrior, well, by a warrior, and he cursed the beast to live under the mountain for as long as the mountain stood. It slipped into this world when the gods weren't looking. That night, Selena ends up bringing a tin of healing salve to Rowan's room because she feels guilty. She finds him looking at a map, shirtless. Lucky girl. She sees his tattoo fully, and he tells her she has the ability to heal him because she does possess water magic. Selena says she wanted to be a healer, but queens aren't healers. Rowan talks about his mate Lyria dying and how he left his pregnant mate alone to fight in the war. And that's what triggered him when Selena said he left her. So earlier when he was like, "You mean nothing to me," after she was like, "You left me," that's why. After that happened, he mourned Lyria for 10 years and tattooed the story of his shame on his body. And then he bound himself to Maeve with the blood oath. Rowan suggests that they find their way back to themselves together, and Aelin says she would like that very much. She says she feels somewhere deep inside of her an ember begins to glow. So then we have part 2, Heir of Fire. We are back in Rifthold with Adian, and he's having a conversation with Ren at Selena's apartment about their future plans. They're debating if they're going to keep Kill alive, and if so, for how long, if they're going to break the spell on magic, which they decide that they will. Then Ren asks if Adian wants to be king. He says he wouldn't deny his queen anything she asked for. His only wish right now is to see his queen again. We then switch over to Kale's point of view, and he's out drinking with Adian, and they found the soldiers that Murtagh said were at the beacon points when magic disappeared. So Adian makes up this drinking game and is like, whichever soldier has traveled the farthest will buy you a drink. They end up finding the soldier that was stationed at Knoll, which is one of the 3 points of the triangle on the map. This is in the deserted peninsula. They end up talking to him, and he says that all of his men were relieved after 5 years. They were being replaced. The men all had terrible headaches while they were there and sometimes even went mad. He tells them about this black stone tower that was built and that they weren't allowed inside. So that is all the information that we get from him before we just switch right back over to the Omega with Manon and the 13. They're training together. They feed their wyverns goats from a different part of the mountain, not the ones that were raised in the mountain, and they eat that as well. They get a few days off, and Manon is heading into the Rune Mountains to talk to the Stygian spiders and get some spider silk for Abraxos's wings. A storm of freezing rain hits while they're flying, and they land and curl up on the side of the cliff. They eat and fall asleep, and when she wakes up in the morning, Abraxos has his wing over her to shield her from the storm. Oh, I love him so much. The next morning, they find the spiders, and she wants to bargain with them. She wants 10 yards of spider silk, and apparently men have sacrificed their lives for a single yard. The spider is telling Manon what she would want in return, and she wants Manon's beauty in exchange for the 10 yards. And then she shows her a sample of the spider silk. So they cut a little square of the spider silk, show it to Manon, and she's like, "Oh, There are imperfections in this. Take a closer look. And when the spider comes closer to take a look, Abraxos knocks the spider off the cliff. They take the spider silk and they get the hell out of there. Abraxos then gets the spider silk put on his wing, and Manon goes to test it out with him, but he refuses. She's had enough of him, so she sends him back to his holding pen, and Iskra steps in and whips him. Manon ends up tackling Iskra and beating the shit out of her, and Sorel is the one to pull Manon off of Iskra. The next morning, Petra, who's the blue blood heir, brings a lamb leg for Abraxos that her wyvern wanted to give him. She claims that the wyvern talked to them in their hearts, and then she just walks away. Back in Wendelin for just a second, where Selena is touching up Rowan's tattoo in the spots that she burned his arm, since he can't really reach them. They talk a little bit about their parents, if they have siblings. Selena mentions Adian. So Selena's an only child, but she talks about her cousin. She tells him that she doesn't want to be queen because it's another set of shackles, and he says another, but she doesn't want to tell him about Endovier. Then at the end of the conversation, he reminds her that they aren't friends, but whatever this thing between them is still being figured out, and they need to give each other space to do that. We love a mature conversation, Rowan. I said it was a quick stop in Wendelin because we are back in Rifthold, and we are with Dorian, and Sorsha is waking up in Dorian's bed. They've been sneaking around for 2 weeks, and they've been sharing a bed, but not in the manner that he's yearned to. Dorian brought back yearning. Just needed to say that. He asks her greatest wish, and she ends up saying it's for a morning where she doesn't have to run out of the door at first light. Kale ends up showing up and apologizing to Dorian and says that he's been working to fix everything. They talk a little bit about Selena, and Dorian tells Kale he can't pick and choose what parts of her to love. He needs to decide if he's going to be her enemy or her friend. Dorian says that he's already made his decision, and he hopes Kale's is the same. We then switch over to Adian, and they're waiting in the apartment for Murtagh to show up. He arrives and asks if they know of someone named General Narok. We're going to go with Narok. Adian had heard of him, but Murtagh tells him that General Narok was occupying the Dead Islands, and Rolf, who is the pirate lord, had told him about seeing a pale man with a collar at the shoreline of the islands when they passed, and it felt like that creature had been made. He believes that there are several of these monsters and that Narok actually took some of them with him to Wendelin. So now they're all freaking out because they're like, we got to let the people of Wendelin know. So Kale's point of view, he has a conversation with Adian where Adian basically asks him, like, whose side are you on? And Kale says he's not going to turn his back on his kingdom or his prince. Essentially, his loyalty is to Dorian, and that's about it. They go back and forth a little bit, but Adian gets in his face, and then Kale returns to the castle and tells the king about his plans to return to Aniel. Back in Wendelin, it is time for Beltane celebrations. This is probably one of my favorite parts of this book. Apparently, Selena's mother used to tell her that this was her night because she didn't have to worry about hiding her powers on a night of fire. Rowan brings her to the spot that has room for 3 fires. He tells her to keep the 2 on the end. All 3 of them have to be going all night, but keep the 2 on the end low enough for people to jump over because that's like their tradition, and then the one in the middle needs to touch the clouds. She controls the fire for quite a while, but then she gets swept up in the music and it takes over, and she kind of loses her control to the magic. Like the magic takes control of her and she starts approaching burnout. Rowan tries to get her to stop, but she just can't. He picks her up and runs back to the fortress with 2 healers, and she was burning his skin the whole time he was carrying her there. They end up getting her in a bath, and he freezes the water as she melts it. He tells her she needs to be able to recognize the signs of burnout, and he walks out of the room and comes back all bandaged up because he was burnt. And he can see the scars on her back. So real quick before that, she's put in the tub and then her clothes are taken off of her. He leaves and she's leaned forward hugging her knees. And then he sees the scar on her back, several scars on her back, and he asks, "Who did that to you?" And she tells him about Endovier. He seems to be calm, but it's with lethal rage, and he ends up turning around and leaving. I believe this is the first time that we get Rowan's point of view, but he's shifted into his hawk form, and he's racing to Doranel to get answers from Maeve because she had to know about Aelin being in Endovier, and he's thinking about the time that he threatened to whip her, and he's upset with himself. He then realizes that Maeve can order him to not go back to Mistward, so he decides to turn back around and go back to Aelin. Celaena's point of view, she gets out of the tub and falls into bed without putting clothes on. Her window opens. Rowan wraps her in blankets. I don't know if that's clear. Her window opens and he comes in his hawk form. He shifts. He wraps her in blankets and takes her to his room. He tells her she's staying with him from now on. He stays on the opposite side of the bed and asks her about how she got to Endovier and how she got out. She tells him almost everything that happened up until now, minus the word keys, the thing with Elena and Nehemia. They fall asleep holding hands, and she wakes up with him still holding her hand to his chest. This whole thing, like when we realize how much Aelin means to Rowan, I'm unwell. So then Rowan is just fussing over Celaena, making sure that she has everything that she needs to properly recover from this burnout. And he tells her about a Karanam, which is essentially this rare bond where someone can yield their power to you when you get to the bottom of your power so that you avoid burnout. And, super rare. It's not going to happen, right? So then Rowan tells her that a skilled healer could get rid of her scars. But she says that she keeps the scars as a reminder that she will free those in Endovier and Calaculla. He then asks what happened 10 years ago, and she says she can't tell him because if she lets that rage take over, she might destroy the world for spite. He then gets in the bed with her and strokes her hair while he tells her if she's going to hell, then they'll be there together. She then turns 19 in the next few days. Rowan finds yet another body, and he brought her chocolates for her birthday, but he didn't let her go see this body because she's still recovering from burnout. So Celaena is training with Rowan a few days later, and he wants her to make a shield of fire, and he keeps throwing daggers at her that are made of ice, and it's making her more and more pissed that she can't make the shield. He tells her that that wasn't the end of her power the other day. She just let it take control of her, so she has far more power than what that was. She's finally able to get the fire into the shape of a shield. After a week of mastering the fire shields, she decides to go outside of the wards and practice on her own. So she's going there like every morning. Back in the Omega with the witches, Manon is called to see her grandmother, who cuts her cheek with her nails and tells her that she needs to make the crossing tomorrow with Abraxos, or she will kill her, essentially. Apparently, a Kraken witch was spying on them, and she's now being held in the dungeon, and she has been there for 2 days, and they were the last to hear about it, and that's completely unacceptable, hence why she got slapped. The next morning, everyone came to witness the crossing. The bait beasts in the mountain start a rhythm of noise that is then continued by the 13 and the Blackbeak and Blue Blood clans, and they're all encouraging Abraxos to make the crossing. Abraxos ends up snarling at Manon's grandmother, and Manon gets in the saddle, and they successfully make the crossing. We are back in Wendelin, specifically Mistward, and Rowan flies to the battlement wall and finds out that Celaena has been practicing outside of the wards for the last 4 days, and she's been significantly improving her performance during her training. So he was like, how is that happening? Because she's practicing on her own. They find out that yet another body has been found. Rowan finally lets her see this one. The difference with this one is that the demi-fae that was killed fought back and had this black, oily blood underneath his nails. She thinks it's more than one creature doing this. She tells Rowan about the creature from the library and the word keys and how Maeve probably knows how to destroy that power, but she's not telling them. He then tells her that they're going hunting. They don't end up finding anything on this hunt, but they end up sitting in a tree for the night. She's thinking about Kale because she's appreciating the half-naked beauty next to her that is Rowan Whitethorn. She asks him about mates and is basically saying that if Kale was really her mate, she wouldn't have been able to harm him the way that she did, and he asks if she wants the truth. She says not tonight. Rowan and Selena end up finding this cave on the beach, and they see soldiers coming out of it. Rowan shifts and he goes inside. He then reports back that there were 200 men in there and 3 of those creatures with the collars, and they're being led by Lord Narok, and he's described as a creature wearing the skin of a man. They end up deciding to go back to the fortress, realizing that that's where the creatures will be attacking, but then they come across one of them in the forest. So Rowan and Selena split up to attack it without magic because they don't want to draw attention to themselves. It ends up being super close to Selena, and it's essentially hunting her. But then when she looks past the tree that she's hiding behind, it's mysteriously gone. So she then goes to signal Rowan with her blade, and in the reflection of her blade, she sees it standing behind her. A jump scare. It ends up basically taking over her mind. Then Rowan steps in to save her. I mean, of course, how could he not? He pulls her away and then bites her neck so that she can focus on the pain instead of whatever the creature is putting into her mind. Sure, that's why he did it. So they decide to run from it and they go towards the Cambrian Mountains. They get the idea to attract the skinwalkers and then lead the skinwalkers to this creature. So they fight each other and kind of forget about Rowan and Selena. So they end up in a tree after they've orchestrated all this, and they do not close their eyes for the rest of the night. We then have Rowan and Selena back at the fortress telling everyone what they learned, and they start to make all the necessary preparations for being attacked. They're setting some traps in the path that lead up to the fortress and keeping an eye on this group of 200 men. Selena is watching Rowan take charge in all of this and is wishing that he would be able to go back with her to Aderlin and eventually Terrasen, but she doesn't really have anything to offer him, and he has no way to break the oath that he has to Maeve. Selena then feels a ripple of silence through the fortress and rushes downstairs to see Rowan looking shocked while he talks to Emrys, Luca, and Malachi. Rowan ends up telling her that there was an uprising in Calaculla and the slaves seized the camp. The king of Aderlin ended up sending 2 legions to Calaculla, killed every single slave there, and then another 2 legions to Endovier and killed all of them too. She's overwhelmed with grief, naturally, and ends up going beyond the wardstones and unleashing her power on them, and they absorb all of this power. We're back in Rifthold with Kale and Dorian, but Kale is standing guard at the luncheon for the king. The king announces that they killed all of the slaves in Calaculla and Endovier. The king tells Aedion that as a result, the rebels in his territory have ceased their antics, and Aedion thanks him for this. Then Dorian's point of view, he finds Sorsha and is begging her to leave the castle. He says he will give her whatever money she needs, but he needs her to get out of there because if she's caught helping him, there are fates worse than death. He now feels like he understands what Kale did in sending Selena to Wendelin. Glad you came around, Dorian. So then we switch back over to Kale, and he goes to the tomb to mourn, but he comes across Aedion, who's talking about how nothing made him feel worse than having to thank the king for murdering his people. We then move to the Royal Theater, and now this is one of the best, like the subplots in all of this are so good. But so we move to the Royal Theater, and the people in the boxes are discussing like where are the new slaves going to come from? How is this going to affect our lives instead of, acknowledging how horrible it is. And the entire orchestra comes out wearing mourning black. And they perform the songs of Eelway, Fenharrow, Melisande, and Terrasen, all the places that people in the labor camps were from. They finally end with the song of Aderlin. The next day, the Royal Theater was shut down and no one saw the conductor or that orchestra again. Again, boohoo crying. We're then back in Wendelin with Rowan sending this breeze to Selena to cool her off while she's throwing all her magic at the wards. He ends up telling her that the forces from Wendelin will not be coming to their aid. He tells her that she can leave, but she says that the people of Mistward need him and she will follow him to whatever end. He then calls her Fireheart when he looks in her eyes. Later on, he tells her that he did send word to his Cadre. Let me look up how to say that one. According to a Google search, it's pronounced cadre. I guess we'll go with that then. Later on, he tells her that he did send word to his cadre for aid, and he doesn't know if they'll respond. I thought it was like a cadre. Cadre. Anyways, she ends up claiming him as her friend, and after going to sleep, she's woken up in the middle of the night by Rowan shaking her. Rowan tells her that he thinks that they've been betrayed because the enemy forces were able to get by without triggering any of their traps. They go to the walls of the fortress and see the 3 men creature things in the forest, and they're sending darkness into the wards. Then Lord Narok shows up, and Celaena decides she needs to fight them with fire. Obviously. Rowan tells her not to, and then she does it anyway. He tells her not to engage with them, and she ignores everything he told her. I mean, pop off. She's talking with the 3 creatures, and as she's fighting them, she's able to piece together that they're Vogue, and they say that they're princes of their realm. So they're Vogue princes. Celaena is fighting them, and she seems to be running out of her power when she sees a towering man, a massive bird, and 3 of the largest predators she had ever seen. She tells them, she immediately recognizes these as Rowan's cadre, his homies. And she tells him to go help Rowan, tells them to go help Rowan inside the fortress while she continues fighting. We switch over to Rowan's point of view. As all these guys show up, they help him with the fighting. He then turns to the battlement walls and he sees Aelin fighting the creatures. He realizes that she had no intention of making it out of this whole battle alive, and he wants to run to her, but Gavriel ends up holding him down and preventing him from going to her. He starts screaming as one of the creatures pulls her into his arms, and he sees her stop fighting. We're then inside Celaena's mind as the Vogue princes are going through all of her worst memories. She's back in Endovir, where all of the people that she failed to protect are lining up to whip her, and that's including Nehemia and Sam. Her pain is essentially feeding these princes, but they can only take a little bit at a time. They end up slamming into this frozen river at the bottom of her soul. Then we have this memory from when she was younger, and the king and prince of Adarlan come to visit Terrasen. She's complaining of headaches, and then feels like this dark worm is trying to get into her mind, which causes her magic to lash out. In the present, she keeps going back and forth between the memory and now, but in the present, she realizes that the king was using his powers on her. Jumping back into the memory, she's taken to this summer manor while Adian is taken to Orinth to keep them as safe as possible, air quotes around that, basically to keep them away from the king because they don't want the king to be hurt by the fire magic or her to explode on the king or something. So then her parents meet her there, and her mom gives her the amulet of Orinth, which she says will always lead her home. This memory then moves on to later that same night when she crawls into her parents' bed and thinks it's damp from the rain. Her mother's lady in waiting her name is Lady Marion. She's Lady of Paranth. Her daughter is Alid, and Lady Marion takes Aelin out of the bed, bathes her, and just holds her. No talking happening this whole time. They're waiting for help to arrive, and they hear a singular horse circling the house, and Lady Marion tells her that she needs to run for the river. Lady Marion essentially sacrifices herself while Aelin is supposed to be running away, but she watches this mystery man kill Lady Marion. He gets on his horse and follows Aelin to the river. She makes it to the bridge, but before she can fully cross it, he cuts it. We go back to the present, where she's basically watching the Vogue princess kind of feast on all her memories. She ends up seeing a younger version of herself telling her to get up, followed by Sam. I'm getting chills. Sam, Nehemia, her parents, Lady Marion, and her uncle. When the Vogue princes see this, those same people start calling her a traitor, a murderer, a liar. So they're putting all these negative thoughts into her head. She ends up deciding she needs to fight for her people. She then grabs the hand of young Aelin and gets up. We switch to Rowan's point of view. He's trying to get to Aelin, but Gavriel and Lorcan now are holding him down. He hears his mate Lyria calling to him from the darkness, and he wants to go to her. All of a sudden, there's a flash of light in the darkness, and Aelin is attacking these creatures again. She's basically able to completely burn 2 of them, leaving just Lord Narok and the one that they sent the Skinwalkers to go kill. Spoiler alert, he's not dead. He's standing right there. Rowan ends up running towards Aelin, slicing his dagger across his palm, and offering his power. She had suspected for a while that they were Karanam. Rowan holds her close to him while she uses his power to kill the remaining 2 Volg princes. All that's left at the end are 4 Wordstone Callers, and I do want to say that Rowan ends up burying these somewhere because he didn't trust the other members of his cadre. What is it, cadre? I'm going to go with cadre. He didn't trust them to not tell Maeve about it. We are back in Rifthold with Chaol. He ends up finding Dorian and Sorsha together in her workroom. He tells them about all of his theories on magic disappearing, and then Dorian agrees to help them figure it out. Dorian and Chaol go down to the secret passageway, and Dorian is able to connect his power to these 3 crystals and then freeze this bowl of water in the middle of the 3 crystals. Then when he knocks one of the crystals over, the ice melts. This gives them the idea that if they take out one of the 3 towers, one of them being the clock tower in Rifthold, if they take out one of the 3 towers, should be good to bring magic back. We are back in Wendelin yet again, and I forgot to mention this earlier, but when she was fighting the Volg princes, one of them cut her hair, so now she has like collarbone length hair instead of this really long flowy hair. Just feel like I needed to put that in there. The other warriors left, leaving only Gavriel, and he basically warns Rowan that they're all going to have to give their reports to Maeve of what happened there and wishes him luck. Rowan then brings Aelin to this forest pool and basically tells her that the king is going to be hunting her down, knowing that she's alive. She's thinking about everything that happened and then pieces together that the 3rd word key is in the amulet of Orinth. Brandon took the medallion from the high priestesses in Mala's temple and then stole the stags and brought them to Terrasen. He put the word key into the amulet and it has been passed down through generations. She wants to tell Rowan about this, but since he's bound to Maeve, she can't because he would be forced to tell Maeve that information. So instead, she tells him a story about a young princess who loved her kingdom very much, and I'm unwell. A week goes by and it's time to go see Maeve. They say their goodbyes to Emrys, Malachi, and Luca. She offers them a place in her home when she reclaims her kingdom, and Emrys tells her that her mother would be proud of her. We are back in Rifthold for just a second with Adian. He's with Ren and Chaol in the apartment, and they're making plans for Ren to leave in 2 days when Murtaugh comes storming in and says, Aelin's alive. Everyone in Rifthold is talking about it, saying that she's been hiding in Doranel this whole time, and she just defeated Lord Narok and his men. Murtaugh then gets on a horse and is going to spread the word to all of the allies that they have that Aelin is alive and basically start gathering this court. Dorian's point of view, he's watching his dad completely rage over finding out that Aelin's alive. He's sending councilmen to the butcher block for trying to calm him down. And Dorian says that when Celaena gets back, they'll change the world together. Okay, we're then back with Celaena. We are with Celaena and Rowan. It's a week later and they've made it to Doranel. They go before Maeve and Maeve wants to see what Aelin can do as far as, show me your magic. And she refuses until she tells her everything she knows about the word keys. She doesn't really get a lot of new information, just that the king probably has 2, which we already kind of knew. And if he had all 3, he wouldn't need the collars or the rings to control everybody because he would have full control. She talks a little bit about the Volg princes and how powerful they can be. Maeve then asks if she knows where the third word key is, and Celaena says no. Maeve ends up forcing Rowan to tell her everything he knows, which is that she knows where it is, but she didn't tell me. That's the truth. So Aelin says that she would not tell Maeve for all the world. So then Maeve makes the other members of the Cadre whip Rowan until Aelin tells her where it is. She's like, oh, not for all the world. What about for Prince Rowan? Okay. She's about to tell Maeve when Rowan tells her mind to mind, don't. And then Aelin bursts into flames. This is such a good book. Okay. So Celaena wraps the entire building in fire that doesn't burn. She reveals that she knows Maeve wanted the keys for herself, and they were taken from her by Brannon and Athril. And if you remember from earlier, don't know if I said it earlier actually, Athril is Maeve's beloved. Maeve built the city of stone so that Brannon's descendants wouldn't be able to burn it down. Celaena is able to get Rowan away from being whipped. He's then called over to Maeve, and Maeve tells Celaena to leave. Celaena opens up this piece of her mind to show Maeve what Narok showed her. She shows her a vision of people chanting her name and using the word stones to bring in armies to fight for the people. Basically, peace has been restored. Aelin has all of the word stones. People are chanting her name. She's the queen. So she shows that to Maeve. After that, Celaena bargains with Maeve. The bargain is basically that Celaena will give her the ring that fell out of the sword in exchange for Rowan's freedom. Maeve ends up freeing Rowan of his blood oath, who then immediately takes the blood oath to Aelin. The way that this scene is described, that he puts their foreheads together, he kisses her brow, and then he kneels before her and is talking to her mind, is like, just do it. They leave Dornell and they go to an inn where Rowan tattoos her back. She prays to the gods and sings songs in the old language, and the tattoos cover her scars, and therefore her parents and uncle, Lady Marion, her people, and then Sam and Nehemia. We're then going to switch over to Manon. It's time for the War Games. Manon and the 13 are running the show. They're about to win, but then Iskra's wyvern attacks Petra's wyvern, and they start falling. So Manon and Abraxos race to save Petra before it's too late. Manon is able to grab Petra's limp body from Keely, her wyvern, and Abraxos grabs Manon holding Petra off of Keely before Keely hits the rocks below. The Blackbeaks end up winning the War Games, and Manon is made wing leader. During celebrations, her grandma brings out the Kraken witch from earlier that they were holding hostage and tells her to kill the witch and take her cloak. The witch ends up telling Manon that she pities them because they were made to be as brutal and hateful as they are. They were made to be that way, and they pity them. Manon ends up killing her and then heads into the mountains with Abraxos, where she feels grateful for his presence. Back in Rifthold, Kale is on the rooftop of Celaena's apartment with Aedion. He's internally thinking about Celaena coming back, like when she's going to come back. And she will be coming back as Aelin and not Celaena. He knows that Celaena would always pick him, but Aelin would not. So Aedion asks if there's anything he wants Kale to tell her, and Kale says to just tell her that they had nothing to do with each other and that he's fine in Aniel. Then Sorcia's point of view, she's cuddled up with Dorian, thinking about how she's grateful for the time that she's had with him, but she doesn't think that she would ever be a good queen. Kale's point of view, it's now him, Dorian, and Sorcia. They make a plan to leave together when he goes to Aniel, but then he's summoned to the king's personal chambers to find Aedion surrounded by 15 guards that are wearing that black wyvern patch, and they don't recognize any of them. Switching to Dorian's point of view, he runs to Sorcia. He's trying to get her out, but then they're caught by guards. Well, they're caught by Amethy, who then turns them over to the guards, and they're sent to the king's chambers. So the next couple chapters, we're going to jump between Aedion, Kale, and Dorian's point of views, but we're in Rifthold for the next little bit. The king tells him that he has spies that report to him and he knows Dorian was planning on leaving with Sorsha. 2 guards appear and force Sorsha to her knees, while 4 guards hold Dorian back. Dorian then says to the king, if you let her go, I'll tell you anything. The king's like, okay, well then why is Aedion meeting with Chaol? And Dorian's like, I don't know. He genuinely doesn't know. So it's like he doesn't even have the answers that his dad wants. Chaol is about to step forward and essentially turn himself in to save everyone when Aedion beats him to it. And Aedion is thinking that he's essentially giving this gift to Aelin of Chaol's life and sacrificing his own life for Chaol's. The king then decides that he's going to keep Aedion hostage until Aelin decides to show up and save him. The king then says that he knows Sorsha has been writing letters to her friend about all of his movements. Sorsha tells Dorian that she loves him. Ooh, this one was hard. Dorian tells the king to name his price. The king says no and has Sorsha's head cut off. Chaol ends up drawing his sword, calling Dorian the one true king. The king orders him killed, and right before he's hit with an arrow, Dorian's magic completely explodes. So Dorian uses his magic against his dad and is telling Chaol to run, and Chaol tells him that he loves him and flees. Aedion is being taken to the dungeons, so he doesn't really know what's happening. He just kind of hears the magic back and forth, and he just wishes that he got to see Aelin one last time. Dorian is fighting with his father, and then a wordstone collar is put around his neck. Chaol grabs Fleetfoot and Damaris and some of the books from Celaena's room, and he escapes through that sewer tunnel thing. But before that, he tells Mort where he's going, even though he doesn't respond, just in case Celaena talks to Mort and doesn't know where Chaol is, and he flees the castle. Chaol gets to the apartment where Ren reveals that the friend Sorsha was writing to was him. Because earlier, Ren was like, oh, I have friends in the castle, I know what's going on. It was Sorsha. The last time that we are with Manon and the 13, we find out that they're being sent to Marath to serve the Duke. As they fly, she's thinking about them being able to reclaim their broken kingdom after they serve the king. Now, I don't know if it's the 13 plus more, but it's like half of their host is taken with Manon to Marath. Then we have the point of view of a nameless man who goes to the Avery River and throws an eagle pommel sword into it and saying that he now has no name besides Oathbreaker, Traitor, and Liar. And then the last chapter is going to be from Aelin's point of view. Yes, I said Aelin and not Celaena. It's been 2 weeks and she's about to get on the ship to head back to Adarlan. She's going back as Celaena, not Aelin. And Rowan does not like this at all. He wants to go with her, but she's like, magic doesn't work there. You should stay here. And he ends up saying that he's going to stay and help kind of rebuild Mistward. She's planning on returning and calling in all of the favors that are owed to Celaena, owed to, her parents, that kind of thing. She's going to build her court. She also wants to talk to Chaol and ensure that he will be safe. She gets in the boat, and when she comes back up from being under, like in the bottom part of the boat, she comes back up and there's a white-tailed hawk circling who passes by her, grazes her cheek, and then flies off. And she says that she is Aelin Ashriver Galathinius, and she would not be afraid. Oh my days. That was amazing. I love this book so much. I'm so happy that I got to reread it. I'm really loving this Throne of Glass reread. However, I'm not super looking forward to stopping here and instead of going right into Queen of Shadows, going into Assassin's Blade. I'll let you know how I feel about it. As of right now, I think Assassin's Blade should be first. If you're not going to read it first, I think it should go after Crown of Midnight. Not after Heir of Fire, but what do I know? But thank you so much for listening all the way through to the end. If you've made it this far, you are officially part of the Baddie Club. So today's emoji is going to be the fire emoji. So if you are listening to me right now, either DM me or comment on my most recent post a fire emoji so I know you made it this far. Thank you so much for supporting me. I really love and appreciate you. You can check me out on Instagram at bestfriend.bookclub or at simply serotonin. It's simply SARATONIN. TikTok at bestfriend.bookclub. YouTube at bestfriend.bookclub. Pretty much standard across the board. I think that's everything. The Patreon's going to be patreon.com/bestfriendbookclubpodcast. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I can't wait to talk to you next time. Bye.